The UK housing market has long been a topic of heated debate. For decades, it's reflected the nation's economic health, its social inequalities, and the growing gap between those who can afford to buy and those who cannot. Now, with a rumoured massive black hole of more than £40 billion in public finances to fill, the government is potentially turning its attention toward property as a potential source of revenue. Chancellor Rachel Reeves has ruled out headline increases in income tax, national insurance or VAT, all politically dangerous options that would hit working people directly. Instead, property tax reform has emerged as one of the most likely candidates for the upcoming autumn budget. But what exactly does that mean for homeowners, renters and first-time buyers across the country? And why does London in particular stand to be the most affected? To understand the scale of these rumoured tax changes, we must first look at the property market nationwide. The UK's housing stock has become one of the most expensive in the world relative to incomes. Average house prices now sit at over £280,000 with significant regional variation. In areas such as the North East, prices on average are closer to £150,000, while in London they average well above £500,000. With many boroughs routinely hitting the £1 million mark. This imbalance means that any reform of property taxation will not land evenly across the UK. A flat nationwide tax based on property values would raise relatively little in some regions, but in London and the South East it would translate into far higher bills for homeowners. At present, the UK relies primarily on two main property taxes, council tax and stamp duty. Council tax has been criticised for decades because its valuations are still attached to property prices from the early 1990s. Since then, house values have skyrocketed, especially in London, yet the bands have not been updated. As a result, someone living in a modest terrace house in the Midlands could be paying the same or even higher council tax than someone living in a multi-million-pound townhouse in Chelsea. The system is widely seen as outdated and unfair, but reform has long been politically toxic. Stamp duty, meanwhile, is an upfront tax on property transactions. It raises significant revenue for the Treasury, but is often accused of freezing movement in the house market. Buyers not only have to find the money for a deposit, but then face thousands more in stamp duty before even picking up the keys. This makes the initial cost of purchasing a home far higher, discouraging first-time buyers and reducing geographic mobility for families who want to relocate. Economists have long argued that stamp duty is one of the most economically damaging taxes in the UK system. This brings us to the options now reportedly under consideration. One is a nationwide property tax based directly on the value of a home. In theory, such a system would replace stamp duty with an annual charge tied to a property worth, giving the Treasury a more consistent revenue stream, whilst removing the upfront barrier buyers face today. But the implications are far from even. For homeowners in many northern towns, annual bills could be pretty modest, in some cases even lower than current council tax. In London, however, where average house prices already exceed £500,000 and tens of thousands of homes are valued at £1 million or more, the costs could soar. In a city where house prices have been pushed sky high by decades of international investment and chronic supply shortages, such a reform would hit disproportionately hard, making London the clear epicentre of property tax overhaul. Another option floated is the so-called mansion tax. This would not be a general property tax on everyone, but a targeted levy, such as a capital gains tax on the sale of properties above £1.5 million. The politics of this are clear. It would allow the government to argue that only the very wealthy are paying more, while shielding middle-income homeowners. But once again, the concentration of high-value properties in London means the capital would shoulder the vast majority of the burden. For foreign investors who've parked billions into London property as a safe asset, this could change the calculus. For long-time residents who bought decades ago but now find themselves living in homes that have appreciated far beyond their income levels, it could spark outrage. The Treasury insists its main priority remains economic growth. Officials argue that keeping taxes low for working people is crucial, but sluggish growth and creeping inflation, now at 3.8%, the highest in over 18 months, have left the government with few attractive options. Property, unlike income, is seen as a less politically volatile source of revenue because it targets wealth rather than wages. Yet, history shows that property tax reform is one of the most politically explosive moves any government can attempt. The mere hint of changes has already sparked heated reactions in recent days, highlighting just how sensitive the issue is. The experience of the stamp duty holiday offers a warning. When the government temporarily suspended the tax for first-time buyers, the housing market surged as buyers rushed to complete purchases. But when the holiday ended, the market slowed sharply, with transactions falling off a cliff. This demonstrated how directly tax policy can affect market behaviour. Any attempt to overhaul the system now, especially in a hurry to plug an urgent fiscal hole, risks creating similar distortions on a much larger scale. Looking beyond London, the impact of property tax reform would vary wildly across the country. In regions where house prices remain relatively modest, households may barely notice the changes. But in South East, and particularly the capital, the financial shock would be profound. London is home to the highest levels of property wealth in the UK, but it's also a city of stark inequality. Introducing higher property taxes may generate billions for the Treasury, but it risks squeezing out not only foreign investors and multi-millionaires, but also middle-class families who happen to live in areas where prices have soared beyond their control. Over the past 2 decades, several areas of London have experienced dramatic property price growth, transforming once modest neighbourhoods into some of the capital's most expensive. London as a whole has seen average prices more than double, rising from around $244,000 in 2005 to over $5,300 today. But the increases have been especially sharp in certain boroughs. Walthamstow, for example, has seen prices soar by more than 650% over the past 25 years, while neighbouring areas such as Leighton, Tottenham, Hackney and Camberwell have all recorded rises of between 500 and 600%. Even traditionally expensive boroughs like Kensington and Chelsea have more than doubled, with average prices climbing from just over $500,000 to well above $1.1 million. Regeneration projects and new infrastructure such as the Elizabeth line in Abbing Wood have also fueled growth, with some districts more than doubling in value within just a decade. These figures highlight how uneven the housing boom has been, with London consistently at the epicentre of the UK's most dramatic property market shifts. The debate over property tax reform is ultimately about balance. Some argue that owners of high-value homes should pay more than those in lower-priced regions, while others say that singling out certain households is unfair and risks destabilising the market. Both sides recognise that there are no easy solutions. Attention now turns to Rachel Reeves and the autumn budget, where the decisions made could shape the property market for the years to come, with London expected to feel the effects most.